Hi, everyone. If I have not met you before, my name is Cal Marquez. I work at Bywater Solutions on the Aspen Discovery team. Primarily, I work with implementation. So a lot of you I've already met, but some of you I have not met before. Thank you for joining us for Aspen Academy. Just a little backstory if you didn't attend any of our other sessions. We've now been hosting some library partners on Aspen for 4 years, which is insane to think about how time goes by so fast. And there's just been so many changes. We have a monthly release. I'm gonna go ahead and decline that. Okay, sorry. But we've been supporting partners on Aspen for almost 4 years. And with that, we have a monthly release, so there's just tons of different changes. And we wanted to host a series of these webinars on different topics, just because as we know, you maybe don't keep up to date every single month on every single line item change in Aspen. And we thought it'd be good to have a bit of a refresher. So whether you're brand new to Aspen or you've been with us for like maybe 4 of those years, we just thought it'd be nice to kind of roll out some different topics. So thank you for joining us. Today we are looking at the overview of kind of the Aspen administration. So major areas that we get a bunch of questions on relating to kind of just like overall setup and structure, permissions, things like library systems versus locations, IP addresses. So I'll try to cover as much of that as possible within the next hour. I'm also joined with Morgan here on the Aspen team. So as I'm kind of like demoing and sharing my screen, she'll be taking over the chat and answering any questions that you might have there. So you have both of us, so please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We did post an agenda, but for any of those folks that just joined on Zoom, I will post it one more time. And I am going to probably share my screen and get started because we have a lot to cover. So I have a test site up here. And today I have full admin permission. So I do want to say in the agenda, you can kind of get a feel for the different permissions that you will need to kind of see everything that I'm sharing today. Because we have so many different configurations with libraries, primarily what I'm going to be sharing is if you are an Aspen admin of, say, like a consortium and you have access to all of those menus. So some things you might not see if you're in a consortium at the library level admin. So I just did want to say that. Or if you're a single library system, then you should also, if you're the admin, should also have access to the things that I'm going to share. But if for some reason you're not seeing something, feel free to ask in chat and we can kind of help troubleshoot. All right, so I am going to log in, or I'm already logged in. And I guess the first thing is, depending on, if you've logged into Aspen ever before as an admin, is how you get into the admin section. So some ILSs, for example, might have 2 different ways that you log in, an access point for your patrons versus an access point for your staff. With Aspen, it's all the same URL. So your catalog is where you're going to log in. But of course, you're not going to see the same thing as your patrons see when you log in. So for an admin, when you go and log in, you should see something over here like Aspen administration. So this link with these tools, that's going to get you into your backend settings. Also, when you're in your actual account, so if you log in from the home page, it takes you into your account. There's also this Aspen administration button here. So either way, that's going to take you into the full menus that you have access to. Again, depending on what modules you have turned on, which we'll talk about, and what things you have permissions to, this view could look very different, or it could look exactly the same as what I'm sharing today. With this over kind of like structure of how the menus are set up, they are based on modules. A few releases ago, we re-alphabetized or resorted these in alphabetical order. They sort of were just like random before, and as we kept adding more and more modules, we're like, alphabetizing is sort of our thing, so maybe we should go ahead and resort these. So now you're going to see these, you should see Aspen Discovery Support, which is wonderful, right at the top. It used to be more towards the bottom, and then all of your other modules will be sorted alphabetically. Another change, maybe 6-ish months ago, I don't know what time is anymore, but we made these searchable. So if you kind of scroll and you're feeling like, wow, there's a lot of modules here, there is a search bar right across the top. And as you start searching, it's going to narrow down your results. which, I mean, that's life-changing. If you've been using Aspen for a long time, that didn't used to happen. So that's really helpful just to narrow down exactly what you're looking for. The first kind of big one I wanted to talk about is this Aspen Discovery support. We get a lot of questions about like Aspen Discovery community and release schedules and like all of those types of things. And this Aspen Discovery support module is really helpful for a variety of those different things. So the first thing is actually tonight, everyone that's supported by Bywater, you will be getting the 2404 release. When we have that release tonight and you wake up and go to work tomorrow and you're looking on Aspen, you could come into this section and look at your release notes. And this would actually show you any of the updates in this release. So you would see 2404 tomorrow. Any tickets that you've submitted are also mentioned here. So we're always looking for like your development request tickets or, hey, I noticed this thing wasn't working, those types of tickets. And we do try to note those in the release notes as well. So you should see a little mention to that. There's also all past releases. So there's a drop down of everything and you always have access to that information. If you might have noticed, when I clicked into this, my admin menus shifted to the left side. So I can actually search these from here as well, which is great, or I could just navigate to other areas of that, that module or different sections of the admin menu. One other thing I wanted to kind of point out is we always have access to the Help Center, which is help.aspendiscovery.org, our best friend, our most bookmarked and favorite site to go to. So that is wonderful. The other thing we have for our Bywater partners, we have an integration with our ticketing system. So you should be set up where you can view all of your active tickets that you have submitted. And I set somebody up, so I'm sorry if you're seeing your current tickets. And then you can also submit a ticket right through here. I will say when you're logged in, it will pre-fill your email address and then it will pre-fill your name and you can put in a subject and a description. And when you submit this ticket, it will open the ticket in our ticketing system. So it is syncing. The other thing with this is we have this set priorities section. If you've ever attended one of our monthly Aspen gatherings, you might have heard Jordan talk a lot about the different priorities that we have every month and all the things that we're working on. This is a huge help for us when we're looking across all the different library that we support and what they might be interested to see for development. So one thing that we ask for you, and you might have seen this response on tickets, is can you please let us know your priority for this? With this, what we ask you to do is hit add new under set priorities, and you have 3 slots. So you have priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3. When you click on this, it's going to pull in all of your Aspen tickets from the ticketing system, and then you can let us know by from the dropdown which priorities you have. Then every month, Jordan is looking at these and she's pulling all the different priorities from all of our library partners. And it's amazing that you start to see patterns of things that people are interested in, or just by the nature of different vendors and other integrations, things sort of, change kind of at the same time. So if we see that like 5 different library partners are all requesting the same #1 priority, that's super, super helpful for us to gauge, where we should invest our time and our resources. So this is yours to update, and we pull all this data in from that. With those releases too, I did want to point out our community calendar. So if you are curious, like when the next release is or any other things with going on in the community, it's help.aspendiscovery.org/community. And just to kind of give you an idea, we have lists with all of our different community groups. So this is expanding different ILSs and different specialties that meet. And then also here's our entire calendar. So today, 2 o'clock Eastern, at Aspen Academy. And then tomorrow, that's when the next release will be on your server. So this is really helpful to know when you're going to get those new features. Okay, so let's go back to just the admin section here. Even though we have it on the side, I kind of like to start from this view. One other thing with these modules that I want to show you. let's say you're setting up a new integration. We have actually happened to this today. Actually, I was setting somebody up. So somebody wanted to add their Communico attend events calendar to Aspen. So the first thing that we would do if you're setting up a new integration, like even like an e-content provider or a calendar integration, usually there's an associated module with it. So what I would do is I would search for modules. I see my modules. I would click into that. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for that corresponding module. So we don't necessarily turn you on with everything by default that Aspen has to offer. So if during implementation you didn't have those subscriptions or integrations, but now you're adding them, then maybe you reach out to us, or maybe you just want to do it on your own. But let's say I did want to add an events module. I would go and I would find events and I would click on it. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click enabled. When I hit save, that's the first part. And then usually just as best practice, once you enable a module, every module has a corresponding set of permissions that go with it. So then the next step I would probably do is I would go into my permissions and I would make sure that my administration role had permissions to do everything I needed to do with that module. We'll get into permissions as well, but I would probably just go back to my administration settings and I would probably just search for permissions, click into my permissions, and whatever kind of like full admin type role that I utilize, it might be OPAC admin. You might have made a customized. We have some like superhero admin administrator roles, different things that libraries have created. But if I had something like OPAC admin, the next thing I might do is search the word event because I'm looking for the corresponding permissions for that. Then I'm going to see this module here. And let's say I have Communico and I want to administer those events facets. So when I hit save, I should now see in my settings a new events module that's popped up. Let me just hit refresh. And voila, I have all the permissions that I need to be able to now administer that. So best practices, if you're turning on something new, see if the module is enabled, click yes, then make sure that your role is updated with any related permissions. And then if you hit refresh, you should be able to see that module pretty much instantly right away within your admin settings. Then of course, you're going to go in, you're going to plug in, the necessary things to set that up. But basically, when you put in a support ticket with us, that's what we're doing. So we're going to see if there's a module, making sure that you have the permissions. But a very common question that we get is, I don't see this. Usually like 99.9% of the time, it has to do with that second piece, which is just double check that you have the permissions to actually do the things with that module. All right, we're going to dive into permissions in a little bit more. But the next kind of area I wanted to tackle was more of the actual like structure of Aspen and your catalog, your locations, and how all of that works together. A lot of that is done, kind of the setup is done for you during implementation or during the initial setup. So maybe, you haven't looked at it in a while, or you just kind of need an overview of that. So I'm going to go back into our Aspen administration settings. And the next settings that we're going to look at are under primary configuration. So I'm just going to pull this up for a second. So this is probably like the majority of areas when we're turning on a setting, or you say, I want this on or off, or I'm looking for this configuration item. I would say like almost always the best place to start would be in library systems. It is chock full of dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of settings. I'm not exaggerating. And if you look at the Help Center and you see like paths of where a setting is, it almost always is in library system settings. So if you are looking for something, that's generally a really good area to get familiar with or to check out. When we look at library systems, I think of that as my catalog. So if you are just a single library system, you might have one of those. If you are managing a consortium, you might have, or you will have, a set of library system settings for each individual catalog that you manage. So just kind of depending on what your situation is, you're going to see different options here. But I think library systems, library catalog. Then we have locations. Locations, I think about your branches. So typically I think about it as like your four walls building. So main branch, east branch, but also this could be any of like your holds pickup locations. So maybe you have lockers, maybe you have drive up windows, bookmobiles, something like that. But this is more of like your actual locations, your branches. I know like with different ILSs that language that we use, this language versus what your ILS uses, I know it can be a little bit confusing. So I think library systems, catalogs, locations, I think branches. All right, so let's click in to library systems. Usually, I know that I'm there because typically I'll see some sort of URL. So in my head, URL, catalog, that kind of goes together. I'll also point out just sort of like usability. These are all searchable at the top. So whenever you come across menus that look like this in Aspen, they are searchable. So if you, let me see, Aspen, well, that doesn't help. They're all named Aspen. How about library? Okay, so if I start typing there, it's going to narrow down to just that one option. So I find that really helpful. It's also sortable. So if you want to make this like, if you want to alphabetize it, you can move these little arrows up and down. But I find that really helpful, especially we have consortiums up to 500 different library systems. So you can have a ton of different configuration options. Also within your different settings, this is kind of hidden and I think sometimes maybe it's underutilized, but you do have filters in a number of your different settings up at the top. And you can add a filter here. So if you wanted to narrow down by one of these fields, it's just another option for sorting your different options here. So you could add a filter and then you could decide which field you wanted to sort by. So some different options there. The other thing I just like to point out, especially if you're new on Aspen, we try to point this out, but this little square that you see here with the pencil is the same as if you were to click into edit. Either way, it's going to get you into the settings. The other thing that we added maybe last year, but we have a lot of batch update functionality. So for example, maybe you have a number of different library catalogs that you manage and you wanted to enable PIN reset for everyone or turn on self-registration for everyone or something in batch across all of these library systems. You could do that by either checking a number of different boxes and batch updating selected, so just these three, or you could click batch update all and do all of your different library systems. So let's just do batch update selected. From the dropdown, you're going to see all of the different settings within library systems that are either a checkbox, so something that you just enable with a check, or like a single line item. So the single line items will be something, a field where you're filling in like a URL, or a field, let's say you want to set the minimum length of your PIN to 4 digits. So something where you're filling in like a short answer. So any of those fields can be batch updated with these settings. So if you have managing a ton of libraries, this is very helpful. So I'm just going to click one at random. So allow PIN reset. I'm going to check that box. Now it's going to apply it to all of those library systems. You can also do some things with batch deleting. I would say be very cautious with the batch deleting. We love batch update all day, every day. You can always redo it or undo it if there was an accident, you didn't mean to do it. Batch deleting a little less so, so please be careful with that one. But batch update, completely awesome. Let's see, let me click into one of these. And the other thing I wanted to point out that is somewhat new is that within certain settings now, they are also searchable. So you saw the searching within the admin menus, but if you are looking within things like theme or library systems, locations, These were not always searchable, if you can imagine this. In the dark ages, we used to have to search on the page and find that setting. Now, if I was looking for something to do with like PIN or password, I could just start typing, and those sections will automatically come up for me. So very, very helpful, especially when you're navigating all these different types of settings. Okay, let me show you one more thing. Another thing I'd like to point out, because we love help resources, is that throughout Aspen in the administration section, as much as possible, if we have documentation that supports this specific section that you're clicked into, we have a link up the top to documentation. So in this case, if I click on, I'm in library systems, if I click on documentation, it should take me to the corresponding library systems page in the Help Center. So look for those. I think sometimes like they're kind of hidden and maybe people, there's just a lot going on the screen, but up top right corner, if you're in something like themes or locations or library systems, definitely look out for those, and it should take you to the page where we're defining exactly everything that you're seeing. Okay, let me go back. Okay, let me go into locations now. So I'm going to click down just in location. So this is the same primary configuration I showed you a little bit earlier. And kind of the same table. It's if you've been around the Aspen and the admin area, it starts to all look very similar. So same type of table, but in this case with the locations, I'm seeing more of like those branches that we talked about. So I do have a delivery branch, but I also have some other like library branch, main branch, north branch, south branch. Let's click into one of these. These also have those same batch update abilities. If you wanted to batch update like a phone number on all of them or an email address on all of them, they're also searchable. So if you are looking for something, with that, you could do that as well. Within the location settings, there are a couple that are kind of very important that I like to point out within the location settings. The one is if that branch is a hold pickup location. So especially with like new libraries, when we're setting you up, this one is one that comes up a good amount. So this is in the ILS account integration. And for each location that loads into Aspen, you're going to have this one that says valid hold pickup branch. So this is what's making that when a patron goes to place a hold and they're presented with a number of different branches that they can pick up at, if that branch shows up in the drop-down menu, is primarily controlled by this option. So if you do have something that's a bookmobile or a locker or storage or something that you don't really want users to, like it's a valid location in the ILS, but you don't actually want them to pick up their holds at storage, we would just want to make sure to come in and make sure that it's not probably a valid pickup location for our patrons. So location settings, that's one of the ones that we look at in here. This is also where you're setting up your branch information, like your address, if there's an email address, a phone number, your branch hours. And most of the time by default, where this all sort of like manifests itself is over here in the hamburger menu, you have a library hours and location pop-up. If you are a multi-branch system or consortium, you probably have something like a drop-down menu here. And I'm pointing this out because this was actually redesigned, I think like 2 releases ago. So this should maybe look refreshed for you. Now this whole screen got an update. You can actually you can actually upload an image of your branch location here now. It will show here. You also now have an embedded Google map. There's some additional buttons here that take you out to like your library website, directions to your library with Google Maps, and also the same stuff that we already had too, like the address and the hours. But if you haven't gotten a chance to see it, I think it was 2 releases ago, this got updated. So pretty neat. And it's all pulling from the location information that it finds. All right. Let's see. Okay, let's dive in to permissions. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so I would say this is I find one of the more confusing aspects of Aspen. And I think that we've kind of gone through some different iterations of how we want to roll this out with libraries and things like that. So I think we've kind of gotten it down more into like a simplified approach, but I'm going to try to sum it up and not cause too much confusion. So what you've kind of already seen is Aspen's broken down into those modules, and almost every module and every kind of thing that you see or setting that you see that you can control within that module has a corresponding permission to it. Depending on also your structure, and if you're a single library admin or a consortial library admin, that of course adds even more complexity to the types of settings that you might want to have for your library, what permissions you want to give out. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Okay. So let's start with permissions and creating roles, and we'll kind of look at how we can maybe like simplify this process. So I'm just going to search for permissions. And under system administration, we have this permissions section. I will say, when we actually set up your server by default, there are a number of roles that just get pre-populated for you. That doesn't mean that you necessarily need them. We try to go through and clean them up. But that always hasn't been the case. So there's a chance that you might see a whole list of roles that you don't use. Sorry.
Same thing happened to me today, talking for 3 hours straight earlier.
I know. It's almost like we talk on Zoom too much. Okay. So if that is the case, and right now you're seeing like all these roles that you don't use at all, then I'm going to give you permission today to go ahead and delete them because that's totally fine. But let's just start off with that. So if from a drop down here, you're seeing different ones, that's totally fine. The one that we have learned over the last few years that we really suggest that you do keep is this OPAC admin. I guess the behind the scenes of this is that when we push out new code and new releases, we found out that having this OPAC admin there allows us to assign new modules to your full admin like more by default, if that makes sense. I don't think that we always kind of like knew that was the case. So it is okay if you don't have OPAC admin, but I just need to say my little like, it's probably best not to delete OPAC admin. With these permissions, we typically, when we're working with libraries, we see kind of a few different buckets that these fall into. We have all of these defined also in our Help Center, but we kind of see a full admin. So somebody that has access to everything, which is usually like a very small group of people, like just a few people. Then I would say if you're in a consortium, the next level that we often see is a full admin of that library system. So when they log in, they can see everything related to their library catalog or their library system and those branches, but they don't see anyone else's settings within the consortium. Then we often see a role that has to do with either list making or making browse categories, more of that like curation of your collection type permission. So I can, put together lists and staff picks, and I can turn that into a browse category, like that type of role. And maybe a little bit bigger pool of people. And then the biggest pool of permissions that we typically see is something called masquerade mode. So maybe you're all familiar with that. But that's where you can enter into a patron's account by using their library card number or username, and you get a bird's eye view of that user's account. So that's something we typically see assigned to maybe like the biggest group of people or like all of your frontline staff. Okay, so those are simplifying it down. Those are really the 4 main type buckets that we see. So with that, you might want to try to put your roles together like something like that. The OPAC admin, or maybe you see like full admin, that would probably be that all type role. So they can see everything. When we're looking at the permissions, you'll see that they're very much similar to the modules that you have. So they don't correspond exactly one-to-one, but it's pretty close to that structure. One thing that you'll notice is that almost all of the permissions, let me find some. like library. Here's a good, okay, so here's a good, which one do I want to show? Primary configuration. Okay, let me find it really quick. Okay, so one thing that you might notice, and a little bit of a shortcut when we're looking at permissions so that we're not completely overwhelmed, is that when you see all, so a lot of these things have an all versus a home library. If you are a full admin, so either you're a full admin of a consortium, or you are just like a single library system and you are the full admin, then you probably have these all permissions. This just gives you access to everything. If you are that secondary tier that I talked about, where you're in a consortium and you can manage all aspects or a number of different aspects related to your own library system or your library catalog, you will probably have these home library things. So that's the differential. You don't need both. If you're a full admin, you don't need both of these. So if you're a full admin, you have access to everything, then you probably just need everything that says all. And then if you are at the system level in a consortium, you probably have something related to your home library. So that's really like a big division with the permissions. The other thing that we have with the permissions is, so you're coming in, you're creating a role. One way to also create a role from scratch. So I would say, like, if you're not using them and they don't look familiar to you and they're not OPAC admin, you could come in and you could delete them and clean this list up if that helps you. The next thing is, trying to put those into those like buckets. So if you did have something like you wanted to create like a custom role, you could take an existing role and you could click create a new role and give it a name, whatever you want to call it. So awesome staff. You could include a description to let you know what this role is going to be consisting of. So all aspects of cataloging, I don't know. And then you can even copy permissions from an existing role. So if you have sort of like a base role that you want to add things onto, you can do that. So you're not building every single role from scratch. So I'm just going to create a role. And then you could come through and keep adding things to awesome staff that you want. When you update a role and you add permissions to it, anyone that already has that role automatically gets those additional permissions that you've assigned as well. So kind of keep that in mind. So now that you've kind of created your roles, when you come over to administration users, that's where you actually go and assign them. So I'm going to click on administration users. This will also give you a list of anybody who has permissions on your server. So maybe every so often, it's a good practice to kind of check this and make sure that these folks still work there, and then they should still have access to this server. When you're adding roles, it's very easy to click into a person. So here's Cal McAspen. I can edit her. I can go in and I'll see all of the options available. Now, one question that we get too is, how do I delete a person, or like, how do I take them off? We sort of purposely make it so there's not a delete button. So like all other areas of Aspen pretty much like have a delete button. Here, what we would want to do is, if this person left the library, we're going to come in and we're going to manually uncheck their permissions and hit save. And now they're going to be removed from this list. Why we do that is because sort of like a safety net, there might have been a situation in the past where someone deleted all and nobody had permissions. I'm not saying that happened, but so we do kind of make it so that you have to click into the person and uncheck their roles, just so you know. If you want to add somebody, you can go into add administrator. You can copy and paste down a number of different barcodes or usernames depending on what your library is using. Just one on each line. So however, these aren't real people. And then you can come in and click on those permissions, whatever roles they're going to get, and hit update user. And those don't actually exist, so I'm going to get an error. Other things with this. So if you don't want to necessarily manage an entire list of all of your folks, like frontline staff, for example. So say you're giving out, I want to give out all of my frontline staff masquerade mode, for example, but I don't want to put in 300 barcodes here and assign them all out masquerade mode. In that case, you can also assign permissions by patron type. And I'm going to show you that next. So when we set you up, we load your patron types into Aspen, and I could search the settings, or I know where to look, but if you wanted to search the admin settings for patron types, you can click into that. We will load all your patron types from the ILS. And if you do have some type of workflow where you have like a library staff patron category, then we could look for that staff category. So we have lib staff here. I'm going to click into that. And what I can say is I want to give everybody that has the patron type of lib staff, at minimum, they should have this role. So they should be able to masquerade and use that role. Then I will click save. And that automatically gave any of our patron types that have a lib staff patron category that by default. Now I can still have some of those lib staff that are full admin. So I can still come back over here to my, where is it? I can still come back over here to my administration users, and I can manually upgrade other people. So I can still add Cal McAspen and I can give her full admin. It's not going to prevent that. This is just saying at minimum, this whole patron category gets this role. I would also just asterisk, maybe do a report in your ILS and make sure that everyone there also still should have access to that. And that, you know, that patron category is actually like all staff. So, okay. Let me just check my notes. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. All right. So let us keep going. All right, the next kind of section I wanted to talk about is IP addresses. And in Aspen, we have the ability to add your branch or location IP addresses. These are typically associated with maybe like your public OPAC computers. The benefit of doing this is that when I am a patron and I come into your library and I'm using one of those public OPAC computers, especially if you're in your like a multi-branch system or a consortium, it will know that I'm in that specific branch. It will automatically resort the records within the catalog to that branch's holdings. It will also say it's here. It's just another little indicator that like I can actually get this thing off the shelf right now. It will also allow us to set timeout limits. So I am a patron, I walk up to your catalog computer, I place a hold, I walk away. I didn't log out of my account. Like we don't want that for the next person that walks up. Or maybe I'm just not logged in, but searching kind of sensitive stuff on the catalog. It would be nice if for the next patron, there was more of like a refreshed experience. So not only does it prioritize your holdings, but it also will, it allows us to set some timeout limits for those public OPAC computers. If you're interested in this or you're just wondering how this happens, then this area is called IP addresses. And when you click into IP addresses, maybe you haven't explored this in a while, I will say you're going to see a lot of IP addresses already there. What these are, at least at Bywater, we have a number of different status servers that we are connected to your server. We have like an alerts channel set up so that we can like pull anything that maybe is not working on your server. It also allows us to do things like, we're not going to talk about today, but sharing themes, or we will talk about this in a little bit, but sharing languages. So we store all of our languages on another server and you can pull those in. It also allows us to debug and help you with support tickets. So you might even see like my IP address, it might say like Cal's house or Cal's office or Bywater VPN or something like that. So if you do see things like that, please don't delete them. But I just wanted to explain like what they are and how they're being used. But if you were interested in maybe exploring adding a location IP, You can come into IP addresses. You could hit add new. You could put that IP address or range in. These are not real, I'm just typing things. You could give it a name so that you recognize what it is. So main public library. And then you're going to attach it to a corresponding location that's already in your catalog. So these are the locations that we saw in primary configuration. So when I clicked into like the main library branch, these are all of your actual like branch locations. So I'm going to click on main. It should, when you click add new, already default to the things that you need to be checked. So you shouldn't have to do anything else. And then you could hit save. I will add a little, that wasn't real, but I will add a little caveat with this. If you're adding IP addresses after the fact, so you've been live for a while and you're going in and adding them, I would double check all of your scopes. So like your e-content scopes, like let's say like Hoopla, for example. Oh, oops, this one doesn't have it. Let me find one that does. Okay, so like when I say checking your scopes, I would probably go through and make sure that any of your locations are also checked. When you go to publish things, you might see both of these categories. This location section here, it really corresponds to like your IP locations. So what I'm getting at is if all of a sudden I turned on IP addresses and for the main library and I set that up and I didn't have my cloud library scoped to show on that IP address of main library, then I might see like when I'm in the library, I'm not seeing cloud library, for example. So if you run into any of that or you need help with that, definitely let us know. But best practices is just make sure everything also has your locations checked if you're using IP addresses. Let's see. One other thing just to point out is if you're liking the kind of functionality that you heard with the IP addresses, but it just doesn't work for you. So sometimes we have library systems that have 3 branches, but they all share the same public IP address, right? So it doesn't exactly work for them. You can achieve the same thing by manipulating your catalog URL. This is in our help center, but let me just pull it up really quick. We changed the link recently. Maybe here. Let's see. Real-time troubleshooting. Da, da, da. Nope.
Which one are you looking for?
I think it's in IP addresses now. I don't remember. Yes, we split these pages off because they were getting too large. Okay. So I will drop this in the chat, but basically what you can do is you could put the branch code into the URL instead. So following like this convention. So my branch code here and OPAC equals true, and it will work the same as the IP address settings. So without putting your IP address, you can just manipulate the URL, and you'll still get all the benefits that we talked about with the IP addresses. So some libraries will like use this as a shortcut or like a sticky on their desktop. And that allows them to still get the same benefits when they're sharing the same IP address. So having the branch code here makes this unique. So works the same, 2 different options there. The other thing is like sometimes with consortiums, you might have 200 IP addresses, and that's just, they could be changing all the time depending on like your IT sort of setup and everything. And maybe that doesn't work the best for you. So if for whatever reason IP addresses don't work for you, you can achieve the same thing with branch codes in the URL. One last thing with IP addresses is related to the timeouts. So the length of the timeouts are also controlled in your location settings. So if I go back to our locations, if I click into any of my locations, and each location can be configured differently if you want, or you could do this as a batch update. But I'm going to come down here towards the bottom where I could search this. And I'm going to find automatic timeout length for when a user is logged in and automatic timeout length for when they're logged out. These are the defaults. So it's 90 seconds. These are in seconds, not minutes, but it's 90 seconds when I'm on your public OPAC computer and I'm logged in. And then it's a little bit longer when I'm logged out and I'm just browsing. But these can be configurable for what works best for your workflows. All right. I'm just checking on chat. Yes, perfect. All right. One last little bit here today that I want to talk through, languages and translations. So with languages, I kind of always start this conversation by saying, imagine if you took every word that you see on your catalog and downloaded it into an Excel spreadsheet. That is really like the foundation of how this magic all works with languages and translations. I find this to be like, if you've done an implementation with me, like you probably see me geek out about this. I just think it's super cool. And no matter how long I work with Aspen, it just like blows my mind. But being able to translate so much and to make it custom to your library, I think is just amazing. I will say that this is one of those things that's global. So if you are in a consortium, you do have to agree on a certain set of language. So placehold, you need to call it placehold. Materials requests, you need to call it materials requests. Like depending on that type of language, like you would have to agree on it. So it's not something that can be configured per library catalog in most instances. So we call this like one of the few things that are global or shared across all of the catalogs on your server. So think about that file of the different all the different words within Aspen. And what that gives us the ability to do is not only offer a number of different other language translations. So Spanish, Portuguese, Polish, Chinese, Pirate, we just added a couple weeks ago, all kinds of different language options. But the true, I think, like beauty and power in this is our English to English translations. We work with prison libraries, like K through 12 libraries, academic libraries, public libraries, different people all over the country. Everyone calls library things different. Like there's different jargon for different features. And this English to English translation really allows you to make your catalog custom to your patrons. So I think it's just one of the best things that we have. All right, so how do we do this? This is probably going to be something that's only given out to that really small group, so that full admin, because it is global. So this might be something that not everybody here has access to. But if you do have access to translation mode, the way that you can tell is that usually you would see underneath your languages at the top, this start translation mode. So that gives me an indicator that you are able to enter into this translation mode. There's two primary ways that you can translate things within your catalog. The first is, let's say you're browsing the catalog or a patron points something out to you, or you're just looking at a button and you're like, well, that's not really what we call it, right? You might want to enter into something like translation mode. So you can click Start Translation Mode. Here is where I think about that Excel spreadsheet. So all these boxes just popped up with like all these crazy numbers. Like, what does this mean? It can be like a little bit overwhelming at first. So I think about these as lines on that spreadsheet. So each of these lines corresponds to those different terms. So when I look at right here at placehold 413, it also matches this one, placehold 413. So if I change this, so let's say instead of placehold, I want it to say requested, and then I'm going to update it. Anywhere where Aspen has that 413 value, it's going to automatically translate that. So this is why we want to be very careful with who we give this permission to, because that just changed it publicly for everyone. So it is something that to be of note there. I can exit translation mode at any time. And Morgan did just pop in some best practices, sort of, because we wish it was super cut and dry as this, but there are some instances in Aspen, like your formats, or maybe things like collection codes or shelving locations, things like that that might be best handled in a map. And then so we did put together a document of where there might be settings that exist where you should update the language versus using translation mode. So that's what she posted in the chat. Another very common one that we get. So this was very helpful if I came across it, I was navigating, I just wanted to change maybe like one button or one header or something like that. a drop down, something like that, or a header of a menu. But there are some cases where it's a whole phrase, like it's a pop-up menu when you place a hold, or something like probably our most common one is materials request versus purchase suggestion versus request an item. Like that's one of our most common. Freeze hold versus suspend hold, probably the second most common one. In that case, those words might be throughout the catalog in all different places, and we don't want you to necessarily have to go through and like hunt for them. So you can actually search all of the different terminology within the catalog. So I'm going to go into Aspen Administration now, and I'm just going to search for languages and spell it right. And I'm going to click into translations. This is an interface. And again, thinking about that like spreadsheet that you're searching, you can go into search terms containing and put in that word that you're looking for. So if it was something like materials request, update filters, this will take you to all the different places that materials request is showing. The beauty of this though is that you can come down here and you could do something like purchase suggestions, and then you could copy it down wherever you see it. And then now you're updating these different numbers. So you're updating a lot in batch all in one area. So you might not have this show up as many places as this. And some of these will say admin if they're more like in the admin menus as well. But if you just kind of go through here, you can click and copy and paste down through all the different places where you want to make this change. Then when you hit Save Translations, it will update it across any of those areas. So really helpful. You can search phrases, sentences. Another one is like the reading history default message. You can put like chunks. It doesn't have to be just like a single word. Okay. I know we're running out of time. The last thing with translations and languages that I want to show you is how you can add additional language translations. So in the languages and translations section, right now I'm in translations, but there's also languages. This is where you can see any languages that are added onto your server, and also where you can request to add new ones. So again, I'm going to point you to this documentation link. This is going to let you know exactly what to fill in this section. So if let me just open a new tab here. I'm going to see what languages are available with the corresponding language codes. And I'm also going to get information on how to add these different languages. So it's going to let you know exactly what to fill in for each of these. So if I did want pirate, I could just copy it from our Help Center documentation. I could hit add new. I'm going to put that code in. So it does have to match exactly to what you see on the Help Center. So these codes that are defined here, you do have to put it in exactly. So that's how Aspen knows which one to give you. And then you can just fill in the rest. So this is how it's going to display like within your facets. This is how it's going to display in the translation mode options that you see here. So you can just fill all of those out. Now, if this is just sort of a little thing, but because languages pull in overnight, so they're not going to show until the next day. If you are adding languages, you might just for the day want to click display to translators only until it's actually loaded. And then it will give you time to test it once the language is loaded. So I'm just going to hit save now. Now there's going to be a cron that runs overnight, and then this language file is going to get fetched from the community server that you're attached to. So one of those servers that you see in your IP addresses is actually a server that contains all of these shared languages. So it will pull in tomorrow, and it will be ready for your patrons. Just make sure you come in and switch this back to not showing just to translators. So this is just allowing just the admin that have access to translations to see it. And then it will be available with your other languages here. Right. With 5 minutes to spare, I think I covered all of the things that I wanted to cover today. Morgan, anything else? Do you have any questions? Does anyone want me to show you anything else or have any specific questions I can answer? Just wrap it up. So typically we put the recording of this the day after. All of on the agenda, there's like quick links out to everything that we covered. So if you look at this agenda again, at the bottom, we have like all the different areas that we specifically covered today. Usually the recording is here. And then the next one of these we have scheduled right now, and we are planning on rolling more out. But next month on Tuesday, May 14th, if anyone's using Aspen Lida or interested in using Aspen Lida, which is our companion app for Aspen Discovery, we have the next session of Aspen Academy is next month. You can register here. You can also check out the agenda. And we will be shortly, hopefully, rolling out some other topics for 2024.